Hello and welcome back to the channel. For today it's quite an exciting one because we have our first mid-engine car that we've had on the channel so far. It is the Porsche 718 Cayman. It is the entry-level Cayman, so it is the relatively controversial 2-litre 4-cylinder. The S obviously has the 2.5-litre. Now Porsche models have so many facets to them, so in the interest of keeping this video under an hour long, won't go into too much detail, but came out in 2005 as the 987. Started life as a 2.7 litre flat 6 and then grew to a 2.9 with a facelift around 2009. In 2013, the whole entire new model, it was lighter than the previous one. It was about 40% more rigid, completely different interior and a bit of a new approach to the Cayman model as a whole. And then a few years later in 2016, 2017, the turbocharged variants came out with ultimately more power than the flat 6 equivalents, but nonetheless a very different approach altogether. Okay, inside the Cayman, headroom. I hate to be so predictable and constantly bring up my height like so many reviewers do, but I am more or less 6'3", so there's not a lot of headroom. But legroom is surprisingly generous. Build quality wise, it feels excellent. The quality of the leather feels really good. Everything's metallic. Steering wheel feels nice to hold. The gauge cluster, really easy to read. The tachometer obviously being in the center. This car doesn't have the optional adaptive damping. That was, I believe, a $2,000 option. This car was optioned without it. However, you do have a drive mode dial on the steering wheel, which will control throttle response and gearbox response. Storage wise, well, you don't buy a Cayman for storage, do you? But yeah, there's not a lot. Door pockets aren't very big. Not really storage anywhere else. You can throw stuff on the engine cover though. There is a little bit of room there for small bags and whatnot. Obviously, as you worked out, it's not the manual, it's the 7-speed PDK. This car does have a manual option though, as did pretty much all Cayman variants, which is actually really refreshing. So if you want a manual, you can have one. So the main question is, what is it like to drive? Is the 2-litre 4-cylinder format really that bad? Does it dull the character that much? Well, let's go drive it. First off, the PDK changes gears very quickly, very seamlessly. Driving position, yeah, really good. Being a mid-engine, there's no engine up front, so the bonnet has room to be slopey, so you get a really nice view of what's happening over the front of the car. Now, ride quality. Now, this being the base model Cayman does give you an advantage over the Cayman S, which is 20mm lower, so therefore a little bit less suspension travel. It is firm, not gonna lie, it is a little bit knobbly, but it's beautifully damped in the sense that it's not jolty. The edges of the bumps are really well rounded off. And like most cars, on the open road it settles. Around town you notice it a little bit more, but it really isn't that unapproachable. Yeah, it feels, for fixed rate damping, it feels excellent. Once again, case in point that a good fixed rate damping setting is super satisfying. Response off dead center, really good. Now it is a small car, it's only just under 1.8 meters wide, so it's Golf GTI, but it's short, it's only 4.3 meters long. So it's very easy to place on the road, and with that good visibility over the bonnet, it's quite confidence inspiring. You can be exactly where you want to be within the lane. Yeah, just driving along in comfort mode here. I mean, we accelerate a bit, the gear change is really quick, drops down to third straight away, and then when you back off, fourth, fifth, holding in fifth, and now into sixth. So really user-friendly gearbox. Would I prefer them being the manual? Of course I would. Still, we could knock it into Sport Plus here and it downshifts straight away. We could knock it into manual and then drive with the paddles, which I'd much rather do anyway. Really quick gear changes. Downshifts very quickly, very cleanly. I did notice before, I forgot to say this bit in the interior shot, but it has the optional chronometer. It's quite nice to look at. Does any Porsche owners out there, do you actually use it? Going into some corners a bit. Steering. Yeah, so precise. Nicely weighted. It's an electric steering rack. That's an important thing to talk about actually. In 2017, Porsche got rid of the hydraulic assisted steering and moved to electric, which is a shame because that does kill steering feel. And I'm of the opinion that mid-engine cars, there's hardly any weight over the front axle, so manufacturers should capitalise on that and back off the assistance a little bit because you get more feel. But it's super precise. You can, like I said, you can place it on the road so easily. In the mid-engine chassis balance, this is obviously new to me, having never driven a mid-engine car before, but it feels so natural. Like the front end of the car feels so light, and you get this beautiful neutrality through the chassis that's so satisfying. And it's not unsafe like an old 911 would be, where it would really want to rotate. It feels very neutral, and what it means is you can power out of corners. This car doesn't have the optional limited slip diff, but it doesn't really matter because there's so much weight over the back axle that it would be very hard to overpower the rear tyres, so you can be quite aggressive with how you want to exit a corner. Now, speaking of power, 300 horsepower and about 380 newton meters of torque. It makes that torque at just under 2,000 RPM, and that's very usable. So even though it is a relatively controversial motor, you know, not being the flat six anymore, you get a usability out of it where you can come out of corners really effortlessly. Just bang, bang, bang through the gears. Let's just go second gear. That's nice. On Australian roads, at least with our speed limits, how much more do you need? The extra 45 horsepower in the Cayman S would be nice. Oh, but that's plenty. And the power comes in really high. It makes peak power at about 6,500 RPM. That's very linear in its power delivery, but yet peak torque being 2,000 RPM, you get a beautiful torque shove. Yeah, just going to our national speed limit. There we go. I just rode the torque, changed up to 6th gear. Porsche's flat sixes are quite characterful motors. They're high revving, they sound wonderful. They're a unique sound. But it sounds quite good anyway. Not quite as good as a flat six, but it's still a nice sounding motor. Body roll, excellently controlled as well, despite having a bit more travel. There's certainly not a lot of extra roll that you're noticing. And the front of the car, because it's so light being a mid-engined, there's less master control. So when it does hit road undulations, when you're already mid-corner, it deals with it beautifully. You don't get any sort of distraction from the front end at all. My grandfather owns a 1964 Renault Dauphine. Now that's rear-engined, but that's sort of the same. It's so light, it only weighs about 850 kilos, and there's absolutely no power steering at all. And you get so much steering feel. This car weighs in at 1365 kilos. The PDK gearbox is 30 kilos heavier than the manual, but it's still under 1.4 tonne, so it's a lightweight platform. I completely forgot to talk about the brakes. They're 330mm front rotors with 4 piston calipers and 300mm rear. Not too much to talk about in the way of feel. You don't get too much feedback through the pedal, but it's a light car, so they're effective. And because most of the weight's over the rear, you don't get any front end dive under hard braking. Now, the owner of this car has very kindly let me driven it. This is his retirement present to himself, and not many other people have driven it, so I'm going to treat it with respect and not be driving it at the point where you really start to feel the characteristics of the beautiful mid-engine balance. But that's the point. You don't have to be driving it flat out to get that. There's not a lot of feedback through the steering, but what you get in lieu of that is you get a lot of chassis feedback, even at low speed. And that's the point of the Cayman. Like I said, it's not as hardcore as the 911. I know that's somewhat contradictory considering something called the GT4 RS exists, but it's a fun, chuckable car that just works on twisty bits of back road like this. This comes in at about, 120, 130 grand, depending on how it's optioned. The Cayman S is an extra 30 grand on top of that for a little bit lower, a little bit tighter suspension, and a little bit, 45 extra horsepower and 40 extra newton meters of torque. And then you've got the GTS, which that would be a dream, wouldn't it? A flat six manual. But that's knocking on the door of $200,000. I mean, that is a lot of money. That's 70 grand more than this is. So when you think of it like that, this car starts to make a lot of sense. And you don't need anything more. Maybe this is coming from a place, because I haven't driven any Porsches on the channel, so I don't have a diluted viewpoint. You know, if I had driven other Porsches, it might be different, but this being my first Porsche experience on the channel, you don't need anything more than this, really. And if you want another mid-engine car, well, you've got the Lotus Emira, which is, even for the 2-litre AMG 4-cylinder engine, that's still nearly a $200,000 car. Like, that is a lot of money. I'd love to have a go in an Alpine A1 110, but they've discontinued those now. They were only about 100 grand brand new, so a little bit cheaper than the Cayman, but you can't buy them anymore. Well, I think that pretty much concludes today's video. I hope I've given you a pretty good idea of what a Cayman is like to drive. You know, do not be put off by the 4-cylinder. It's not that big of a deal, not in the real world at least. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. All you have to do is just click that button, and it really helps me find other interesting cars like this to drive. There should be more soon. But yeah, once again, thanks for watching, and see you for the next one.